Hello, everyone. Um, so, I have a story to tell you, and it's about a person named Libby. She is older now, but let me tell you, let me start with the young girl years ago. When Libby was little, she was born to her mother and father, just like many people have been. She was a normal girl, happy and smiling, and played, and she learned to walk, talk, and do all the stuff normal little children learn to do when they are young. She was born in a family that believed in God, a Christian family, and they taught her from a very young age about Jesus. Sometimes her mother would say, Jesus is watching, Jesus can see us, and she would look out the window and look for Jesus. Who is Jesus? Mom says he can see me. So she would look out the window for Jesus, but she never saw him. But as she grew older, she learned that Jesus is the Son of God, also equal to God, and Jesus is God. Well, okay. She began to understand who God was. So, one day, her family told her she was going to go to a new church. So she did. She went to this church. She looked ordinary, like any girl. Pants and t-shirts, or maybe shorts and t-shirts, and she was happy to go to this church and meet the people. So she went to this church, and it was kind of back into a area where there was farms, and well, she passed Amish buggies, and she passed, because it was in the country, so they drove out into the country, and she passed the Amish farms and the Amish buggies, and across the field, down the road a ways, was this small little church on a farm. The building didn't look much. It was kind of sparse and thrown together. Didn't look anything like a church, just a metal building on a farm. I never would have known it was a church had someone not told me it was. So I walked in with my family for the first time, and it looked like a church, but I was little. I didn't ask a lot of questions. So we went to the church, but people looked a little different there. The girls had really long hair, and they only wore dresses down past their knees. And the guys had pants on, and they looked very old-fashioned. Okay, so I'm a little kid. I don't really think a whole lot of it, and I don't question it. And okay, people just dressed a little different. So we went there for quite a while, and we started dressing that way. And one day Mom and Dad said we were getting rid of our TV because people in this church didn't have TVs. Their focus was on God, so that was sad and difficult, but we adjusted to not having a TV, and I have memories of Mom sitting in the living room, uh, reading to us, Helen Keller and Little House on the Prairie. So we spent a lot of time making snowmen in the winter and running through the woods in the summer and burying birds and digging them back up to see their bones and uh, stacking up sticks to try to make log cabins in the woods. We weren't really good at it, but we pretended that it was a log cabin. We would take four small trees close together, and we would stack up a bunch of sticks, and the wall would only end up going maybe a few feet, but we pretended the walls went up to a ceiling, and we played house and hide and seek, and we even took our dinner into the woods and ate it in our little house, you know. But there was a time when I was really small. Um, I don't know how old Libby was, but Libby, I mean, as you can guess, she's myself. And that's why I sometimes refer to her in first person. Um, I don't know how old I was, but I remember um, I had been talking and walking and playing. I wasn't yet in school, but I was young, and my speech had developed, and I spoke and talked to other kids, and nothing out of the ordinary. So, one day I went to my grandmother's house. She lived in a duplex in a town nearby, in the same county as I lived. We all lived in small towns. I actually lived in the country at that time. So my grandma lived in a tiny town. It was a town, but very, very small. And like I said, it was a duplex. And so uh, I remember feeling scared. And I don't know why. And I remember there were neighbor kids because, as I said, it was a duplex. And I remember a boy there, and I remember being afraid of him, and I don't know why. But I remember the adults, like my parents and aunt and uncles. Probably some of the much older kids went out. I believe they went shopping, and so anyway, they went shopping and or whatever they were doing, and I remember not really wanting to talk much and maybe a little scared. And by the time the parents come back, now there was someone watching us. There was an adult watching us. One of the adults who were watching us was upset because I wasn't acting like my normal self. And so, well, I remember I didn't want to go home. So I went home with another family member, and I don't remember much. My mind just kind of went blurred. Like, I blocked it. I can't tell you why or anything. I just totally blocked everything out. It went to a blur. To this day, I can't tell you what happened that night. Why I didn't want to say much. I do remember speaking at my relative's house, but I was shutting down, saying less words, and just, according to the adults, just not acting like myself. And so, eventually I went home with my parents, and at some point I just, soon after, just totally shut down and became mute. At that point, I was a very quiet, mute child. I didn't even speak to my parents, and I did not speak to myself. To this day, as an adult, I do not know why. It's a blur. There are certain things that I remember, like I said, being a little afraid, a lot of kids around, a lot of neighbors of my grandmother's, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings. But that's all I remember. So, I had a good family. I know they wouldn't hurt me. And I had very good parents. So, I was just quiet and disconcerted my parents. I had social workers coming in and stopping in and questioning my parents, what's going on, what's wrong with her, I don't really remember that, but that's what my parents told me. I know I got a lot of attention for being quiet that I did not like. People made a big deal about it. Oh, what's wrong with Libby? What's wrong with her? She doesn't speak. People would make comments. What's wrong with her? She's quiet. Why is she always quiet? And honestly, I wanted to speak, but I didn't like the negative attention. I was a very shy child to begin with, and I did not want attention. And I, at that point, wouldn't dare utter a word, because if I did, I knew I was going to get the, oh, it talks reaction. Oh, it speaks. And that was the reaction I did not want. And I felt like if I had even spoken a word, it would have become front page news. So I remained silent. I don't know how long I was silent, completely silent, but I know it was a good while, probably the biggest part of a year. This was a very difficult year. Imagine being a child that is afraid to even speak a word. I remember looking around the house to make sure no one was nearby. Our bathroom was kind of in a back corner of the house. It was a very old house in the country next to a farm. And I would go in there and I would shut the door, and I would look at myself and think, I wonder if I can speak. I wonder if I can speak. So I'd look at myself trying to build up the courage to say a word, but I didn't. Not yet, anyway. I just wanted to say one word, just a whisper, but I was so afraid someone would hear me. So I just remained quiet. So what had happened was eventually I got so tired of being afraid to speak at this point. Whatever happened that's caused this, I couldn't remember. At this point, I was just damaged because I felt damaged because, I was getting a lot of negative attention. I wish, looking back, I would have just went to my parents and told them I wanted to speak, or let them know I wanted to start speaking. But they finally got me alone one day. They realized that I was getting too much negative attention, and they realized it wasn't helping, and it was causing me to shut down and go into my silence. So I was going further into my silence. So they sat and said it's okay, like no one's around, and they got me just to say one word. Actually, I think it was just like a syllable. And just speak something, make a noise, and I did. And that was good enough. And just worked with me to get me to actually say a word. And I did. And it was nice to actually speak something. I wouldn't speak outside of the home, but I slowly started to speak to my parents and my siblings. And I felt like I was coming back again. But that was the extent of it. I still could not speak outside of my home because of all the negative attention. I remember going to school. I started to school, and I remember sitting there and not speaking. And I don't know why. I have no idea why I didn't want to eat in front of people at school. I didn't speak, and I didn't want to eat around people. So I would sit there staring at my lunch tray of food, sometimes pudding, sometimes maybe it was a cookie, and I wanted to eat my lunch. It looked good, but I would just sit there and stare at it. So I guess what had happened is there would be playtime, and I'm a little girl who likes dresses and fancy necklaces and playhouses and play kitchens, and I began to play with the dollies and other little kids, and I actually caught myself building up the courage to whisper, just whisper, a few words to some of the other little girls as we were playing in the playhouse, looking around to make sure nobody could hear me. So you know what? I learned to speak to other little children.